This is Akashvani. In the weekly program Current Affairs, now we bring a discussion on Forest Conservation Amendment Bill and Biological Diversity Amendment Bill. The participants are Dr. C.K. Varshney and Dr. V.C. Sabata, Environmentalists, and Omvesh Upadhyay, Anchor.
After going through several rounds of checks and reworks, two significant bills, Forest Conservation Amendment Bill and Biological Diversity Amendment Bill, have been passed by Indian Parliament and are in part to be enacted as law. India is hoping to encash on its biodiversity and all set to prioritize national security along with striking the environmental balance. We are joined by two eminent experts on environment issues, Dr. C.K. Varshney and Dr. B.C. Sabata, to talk on this. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Varshney, I will begin the discussion by taking your opinion on this. And for listeners' information, can you please share with us that what are the key provisions of the Forest Conservation Amendment Bill that was passed in Rajya Sabha on Wednesday this week?
I think the amendment bill which has been passed is very significant and makes a very important changes in the existing provision of Forest Act of 1980. First of all, that the ambient of the Act has been restricted to the forests that has been registered or that are on the government record. That is, the government land which has been declared as a forest by the government is only going to be the area of concern with respect to this Act, which means that the lands which are outside the declared forest land are going to have a different kind of a treatment than the lands which are declared under Forest Act of 1927. So this is one such thing. Now you know that there are many areas which have got thick forest vegetation which is outside the land or which is declared forest land in Act of 27. And these are known as deemed forests. And each state have large amounts of these deemed forests. And thus, the protection and the ease with which they can be treated is now relaxed. And only the forests which are declared under Forest Act are going to be the one which will be receiving more strict and more vigilant protection and conservation. So this is number one. Number two, the Act also has a number of provisions with respect to use of this forest land for non-forestry purposes. For example, it is possible now with the provisions that are amended that zoo and also the biotourism can be promoted in the forest land. Once these activities are encouraged and are part of the within legal framework within the forest areas, then they have got long-term impact. Long-term impact and also the cumulative impact. Because as they become popular and more construction and more activity, more business and informal business around the place, all these things and stay areas and hotels as well as other dormitories, etc., they all spring up gradually over a period of time, and thus the very fact which attracts the tourists to these areas has adverse impact from the tourism because there is no control or it has not been defined that whether it is going to be for season or for the whole year and so on. So I think these are some of the things which the new Act has added. It is more important, the more important thing that it has added is that on the national boundaries, there is about 100 kilometers of the area of the forest where no prior approval or restriction will be there in terms of linear infrastructure development, railroad and transportation corridors and things of that kind. And you know that some of these border areas have got either they are in Himachal Pradesh or in the entire Himalayan territory, including the northeast, which are abetting the Chinese border and so on. So the Indo-Tibetan, the biodiversity hotspots are located in the northeast. And these are going to be covered those 100-meter areas. So I think this free blanket given for the linear development and the associated development along the linear infrastructure is something about which one has to think very carefully, that how this is going to be implemented and what kind of repercussion it will have over a period of time. Because of these concerns, so I think these are some of the very important highlights of the amendment that has been passed, that is the Forest Act of 1980 has been amended, and I think about which there are lots of concern with respect to this, and more particularly about the tribal communities which really are occupying these forest lands, that how they are going to be suffering from this kind of a free dealing that is going to take place in the deemed forest.
Yes,
that is
Dr.
the
Varshney.
forests which are outside the declared forest.
Yes, and you very beautifully shared an overview about the amendment. I think it will be better for listeners as well if we discuss both the amendment bills one by one, so that they can get a clear sight of what are the amendments in them. I want to bring Dr. Sabata in this discussion and would request Dr. Sabata to please share detailed emphasis on what are the changes that were made and are introduced by a new section 1A, which prescribes that land will not be covered under FCA after the amendment. What is the new section 1A, Dr. Sabata?
Actually, as Dr. Varshney said, there are two things very important under this law. That is the benefit sharing of the forest. Under the Forest Conservation Act, there are various issues were there where the local people, they are not getting the benefit sharing out of that. So there is the amendment they made, because if they want to do something, they have to take permission for a many departments, and there is a lot of rules, regulations, and this very, very important issue was there in that case. But the local community, those who are staying nearby, they are not having the benefit sharing. So that's why the law they've amended to how to get the local people, particularly those who are inhabitants, and they can use that thing. And another one is to how this forest is, as they are deemed forest, they can be mainly used for the public domain, or maybe public utility. Because many a times what happens, even if you see a small plant in your nearby area, also is very difficult to chopping or something like that. So the Forest Act or the Tree Preservation Act, as we do in Delhi, is very difficult to get out of that for the public. So recently, many people has go to court, many committees has been formed, many scientists, many people they have given their views. After that, they have amended that law, and that is, I think, more and more people, the public, the nearby area people, and the local community particularly, they can get the benefit sharing. I think that is one of the good things they've done.
Dr. Varshney, when we talk about forest, there is a big challenge of balancing economic and linear infrastructure development projects in regard to national security with the responsibility of environmental protection. So I want to understand from you, Dr. Varshney, how does the new bill strike a balance between these two aspects?
I think your question is very apt at this moment, that the Act only provides a freedom that one has to not worry about any prior sanction to make any changes in this 100-meter belt along the national boundaries for linear development projects. But at the same time, the amendment is silent that how the integrity and the minimum damage will be really restricted. And secondly, that what kind of other compensatory activities need to be done wherever such infrastructure project is taken. I think some of these things are not very clearly spelled out. In fact, are not even mentioned. And thus it becomes rather difficult over a period of time that people will take liberties with this. And when we talk of the national boundaries, then at that place we have got some of the best and very highly dense biodiversity areas which are having large number of rare and endangered species. So how this concern for the endangered species as well as their conservation will really be taken care of when this kind of a freedom is provided, or this kind of a, openness is provided where these developmental projects can be taken where as and when they are required. It is important that we have to worry about the strategic linear developmental projects for national security and for the concerns that are there on our border areas. But at the same time, these biodiversity resources are our own resources. They do not have any voice. They cannot speak. And it is therefore, it becomes even more important and we have to be more responsible that in our anxiety to do these things, we really conserve them, protect them and study them and really manage them. And I think on these aspects, the new amendment is not, to my mind, makes things very clear, explicit, and very demanding. It's not very demanding. These aspects have been not really spelled out. And thus, there are concerns among people, environmentalists, conservationists, and ecologists with respect to these areas. And as I mentioned that some of these border areas are very rich in biodiversity. They have got prime forest, that is the natural forest, and which are very high growth as well as biodiversity. And if they get disturbed, and we have seen that how when we do not take care of deforestation, then we find that what we have seen during this rainy season in the Himalayan areas, you see what kind of devastation has taken place. So having seen this kind of a, serious problem, it becomes even more important that precaution as well as certain kind of riders and also certain kind of responsibility and accountability has also to be incorporated in when we are giving this kind of a freedom for doing so. So I think this is my personal observation and personal feeling about this. Although it is important that expeditiously things have to be taken care of when it is a national strategic issue, or where there is a question of safety, or where there is a question of national integrity. But at the same time, it is also important because after all, these biodiversity resources are also of national interest. They are not of somebody else's interest. So how do we really make a balance or at least take care of this? This is where I think more thinking has to be done, and we have to see that how it pans out. But these are the concerns which emerge because of this modification.
And as you said, Dr. Varshney, that there might be some concerns in the minds of people regarding the amendment bill. And if I expand that concern into a question, so I want to ask Dr. Sabata that whenever you talk about the concerns and the impact of this amendment bill onto the lives of local communities and people who live nearby these forest areas, how do you see the new amendment bill will impact the lives of these people? Dr. Sabata.
Actually, what Professor Varshney has told about the concern of the biodiversity issues is very much. The local communities will get the benefit, but there are many miscreants are there. If they expeditiously do the things, I think that has to be check and balance. And the rider is many greedy people is always there in these areas. The biodiversity resources are very much good and very much economic value is there. So many people, they look into that. So the amendment is good for the local people, but it should not be taken by these people, those who are having a lot of interest on that. I think that has to be taken into account.
And now we can move forward to discuss about the Biological Diversity Amendment Bill. And here I want to quote our Union Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Mr. Bhupendra Yadav, where he said that this bill is aimed at providing benefits to tribal and local communities by simplifying processes. We also want to promote Ayush and Ayurveda, and for that purpose, we brought this amendment. So, Dr. Sabata, my next question is to you only, that how do you see what are the main objectives of the new Biological Diversity Amendment Bill?
Actually, it was very rightly said by the minister, and the IUC is one of the major thing in our country now. There is a different separate ministry there for that, but because of the Biodiversity Act 2002, there is a little ambiguity there. Many people, they are not able to do, many companies, they made, their reservations, many other people, those who are looking into the IUC, they were little concerned, and that's why the CBD Naiva Nagoya conference, it was discussed, and again there is a government has made a IPBE, this is the Intergovernmental Panel on Science and Ecology and Biodiversity. They have also given their report that it should be relaxed and the company should give them some hand to get the local products. Those products will come under the biological products or particularly medicinal plants. This can extract, they can do products, they can sell and they can get a market. Also they can have some patent. There are many issues are there in this regard. Those outside people, they do this. But our country, having our own things, we are not able to do that. So that was, I think, this relaxation is there. So the pharma companies and particularly the traditional knowledge, those who are earlier were there, and the practicing people, those who are nearby areas, they will get benefited out of that.
Absolutely. And my next question is to Dr. Varshney. Dr. Varshney, the bill emphasizes the establishment of biodiversity management committees at the local level. So can you please elaborate for our listeners' benefit how these communities will play a role in conserving biological diversity?
Well, it is like this that whenever the biodiversity advantage is taken, then there are three ways, I should say, control over this. One is the Biodiversity Authority at the national level, then at the state level, Biodiversity Board, and at the local level, Biodiversity Committee. It is who are going to decide that who are the beneficiary to whom the benefit has to be distributed. But the more important question that we have to ask is that biodiversity conservation is the primary thing. If you conserve, then only you can make use of it. But if the conservation aspect is not strong enough, and only the benefit of the people is to be taken care of, that how we really commercialize and commodify all the biodiversity and living resources, then you see the question is that we are going to hurt the biodiversity cause itself, because overexploitation cannot be checked. And it is a human tendency to really make money as fast as possible and as quickly as possible. So the question is that it has shared, yes. And the local committees will be very helpful in really deciding who are the beneficiaries of this knowledge base that we have, that is indigenous knowledge, as well as the resources which are available locally, which are going to have a market value and are going to be used. Medicinal plants and the plants of medicinal value are not available throughout, and they are not, there is no guarantee that they will be available in the future because of the climate change, because of the human interference, because of the increasing human pressure. And therefore, to have a free run, even by the local people, is not something on which we will feel very safe and satisfied.
As you raised a very important point that there might be the chances that these plants, due to climate or any reason else, will not be available to us in near future. So then can we say that when this bill promises and seeks to encourage the production of plant-based medicines and sustainable use of biodiversity in present, is it a significant move?
I think you have raised the very right question. When it says sustainable use, but there is no clause which says that how do we decide this sustainable use? What are the parameters of that? This is very important. And then there is also a question that these plants will be some plants which are of great economic value or great medicinal value. People will start growing them after throwing away all other biodiversity and other plants, which means that for growing one important plant for one important purpose, many other plants and biodiversity will be lost. So this is a real concern. Although they will be very economically valuable, although they will contribute to our health system, although they will be also the resources or the money that will come out, generate out of it will be shared by the people and will be available to local people, will benefit them. This is all fine. But on the other hand, we have to ensure that the supply of these things remain intact and remain wide so that their efficacy and their utility is maintained and kept. These biodiversity resources are not unlimited and they must really grow and die there, leave the crop of seed for the next crop to come. Unless we do that, and we take the plants before they flower and before they seed, then I think we have going to reduce their population, and over a period of time they will be finished. So I think there is a very technical point which is involved, and on which the Act is not very carefully mentioning that how these resources in the first place be managed so that they are sustainable. They continue to provide economic benefit to the local community as well as the medical benefits to the community at large. So I think this is number one. The second important point is that the companies which can come from outside the country but which are registered in India will enjoy the same facility as the Indian companies. So I think this is one thing. And the most important point is that there is a serious concern of biopiracy, because the research which is going to take place here in India, which is going to take place outside India, because some plants which are found in India are also found in the neighboring countries. So the question is that how do we handle the question of biopiracy in a very significant way, on which I think a necessary protection and necessary concern as given is really more desirable and should have been more explicit and clear.
And here I want to add few points that the Biological Conservation Amendment Bill also aims to simplify the patent application process and facilitate fast tracking of patent applications. Dr. Sabata, could you share some details on this?
It was given there, and many research people, they are doing that, so I think they have to make a benefit to patent file in the courts, because as I told you, many other companies, many other foreign universities, researchers, they are doing the patent, but here when we are talking about our own traditional knowledge and the knowledge based as the economy is coming, and the more and more universities may do research, and then I think we have to make the file. A very important aspect Dr. Varshney told about the conservation aspect. As you know, there are two types of conservation. One is ex situ and in situ. Wherever the conservation is there, I think should not disturb like that. And if you need a particular thing, I think it should not be completely destroyed and used. That is the one reason I think there in the medical pharma that the companies may exploit these things. So that concern has to be taken care of both in ex situ as well as in situ conservation of the biological resources, so that our more research can be done. And I hear one thing I was just pointing about our universities and the companies, they should do some research on this so that more and more patent can be filed.
So as much as I understand about the issues in the amendment bill is that it also talks about sharing the benefits with the local communities of the new amendment and of the biodiversity that we are trying to promote and make it more sustainable usage. I want to take both of your opinion on this. First, Dr. Sabata, how do you see that?
Yeah, as I told you, it is very good, informative and all beneficial there. This knowledge sharing will be there, economic sharing will be there, but there should be a rider that should be very careful on this. That is my opinion.
And Dr. Varshney, when we talk about that there will be access to benefit sharing with local communities, there are ways that can enhance and people can explore the traditional knowledge base related on biodiversity. What's your opinion on this?
What I'm trying to say is that benefit sharing is very important, because the local community over a period of generations have really learned and researched that which plant is used for what purpose and how it is to be used, and what are the requirements for that, and for which the disease and for which purpose it is to be used. And I think they deserve to be benefited because that they have developed this knowledge, and this knowledge exists within the community, and therefore this reward has to be there, and thus the benefit sharing has to be there from the company to the people who have been really safeguarding and guardians of this knowledge and have also developed this knowledge. This is number one, and I think no dispute on that. What is more important is that the entire bill is really, the main emphasis is on commercialization and economic benefit, while the biodiversity concerns are not very clearly mentioned and elaborated. Because this benefit can come only when these plants survive and are available. And if they are going to be only economically exploited and benefit is to be shared, then over a period of time they will finish. Because these biodiversity resources are for multiple of generations to come. And therefore, the important point is that how they continue to be available as a common property resource, which need to be available to this generation, to next generation, to next generation. So this is very important. In India, there are a large number of endangered species according to IUCN Red List. And there are over 200 species of animals and also hundreds of species of plants, which many of them are medicinal. And there is over-exploitation by the commercialization and by the local interest that now they are endangered and their populations have dwindled very seriously. So I think there has to be some kind of concern which is very valid at this point of time, that sharing benefit is important. And this is given and agreed, but within limits, so that the benefits are shared, but at the same time, the main resource is not depleted. And I think this balance, how this is to be achieved, who is going to control this, who is going to monitor this, how this is to be ensured, I think these are some of the things which require greater clarity, understanding, and so on. The local community themselves do not have much of this understanding. The exploitation takes place at the same time they are able to ensure. Because after all, their area of geographical operation is limited. Biodiversity requires a larger area. And once you have got all kinds of development which are coming, the infrastructure projects, expanding urbanization, expanding industrialization. So these pressures are in addition to the climate change, which is responsible in changing the very growth pattern or the growth support system of these medicinal plants. So how all these things will play out when you start exploiting, and benefit sharing is important, but this is not the only thing on which the emphasis should be. It is important, but at the same time, the emphasis really should be on the conservation and continuation and continuous availability of the healthy and in quantities of these biological resources now and for future.
Absolutely. And since Dr. Varshney, you were talking about how traditional knowledge and protected, and the government should ensure that there should be no exploitation of it. On the same topic in the amendment, there is the term that codified traditional knowledge. For our listeners' benefit, can you please share with us what this codified traditional knowledge means?
Yeah, codified traditional knowledge is that the knowledge that exists and for which there is a written record or some kind of, verified practice that is available. Now, this is what is known as codified. And at the village level, you have got these biodiversity registers, where the local communities enlist the biodiversity found in their area. And along with this, they also mention that which plant is used for what purpose. Now, this is codified. So I think this is one example that I am giving how codification takes place. Then most of the Ayurvedic text that we have, or the homeopathic test or the Siddha test. Now these medicinal or the alternative medicinal systems have in their records the kind of description. Now these are all codified. That is, that this kind of plant is used for this purpose. This is what is meant by codification. So all those plants which have got codification or where the codification is there can be exploited, can be used, and so on and so forth. So I think question of codification becomes very, very important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Varshney and Dr. Sabata, for joining us today on Akashvani.
Thank you so much.
You were listening to a discussion on Forest Conservation Amendment Bill and Biological Diversity Amendment Bill. The participants were Dr. C.K. Varshney and Dr. B.C. Sabata, environmentalists, and Omvesh Upadhyay, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on a mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on a YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.